So earlier today, I was on the phone with a friend of mine, and he showed me an ad that he got from a restaurant that we used to go to a number of months ago, but hadn't gone since then. And it was for a singles event that they were going to be hosting and having a venue for at this restaurant. Now, what I found so interesting about it was that it was marketed towards men. You could tell kind of by the aesthetic of the post. He sent me a screen cap of it. And the fact that it was in my friend's algorithm. This singles event was marketed towards men. Now, I've seen a lot of videos, I've read articles about this, how these singles events are having next to no male attendance at them. And it really goes to show because singles events are a waste of time. And this goes a lot more than just singles events, this whole thing with men opting out. But I want to make a point here because men know what they're about. They're wise to it now. This doesn't matter how tall or in shape the guy is. It doesn't matter how, it's regardless of if the women going there are attractive or not. Men are aware of what they are about. It is just a constant stream of subjecting themselves to ridicule. Mind you, I'm not saying rejection. I'm saying ridicule because this is a big misconception that I see. And I've heard modern women say stuff like this where they think that the reason that men are not going to singles events or even not approaching women is fear of rejection. There is a difference between rejection and ridicule, between rejection and humiliation. What I see now is rejection is exposing the guy on social media, gossiping to their friends, laughing in their face, acting like you were so much better than the guy. And I'm not saying things were perfect when I was younger, but I remember if a guy got rejected by a girl, there was at least some form of integrity or respect. I remember a friend of mine who, childhood best friend growing up, but he got rejected by a girl. And I remember I overheard a little bit of the conversation, but there was at least some form of dignity there. She didn't laugh at him. She didn't go and expose him and make a post of him on social media. She didn't do any of that. So what a lot of modern women see as fear of rejection is not wanting to play games with the ridicule, with the humiliation. Why would you want to subject yourself to that? I want to make a point of something here too. When it comes to standards, because this is ultimately the big problem and why I see, you asked me my opinion. If a woman is even going to a singles event, that tells me everything I need to know. They think that there's no guy that's good enough for them at the mall or when they're going on a walk or just during their daily tasks. So they need to go to singles events to find a guy. Now, there are very few examples that I could think of why a woman would need to be on a dating app or go to singles events to get a date. And even if a woman has no form of community, right? Maybe she's a foreign exchange student or an au pair, she would still have her university or a way to at least meet people. But when it comes to these singles events, they are going to just turn down good men, and men are not going to play this game anymore. They're not. It reminds me of something. I'm sure we could all relate to this, but if you've ever been out driving and you see someone on the road who's just reckless, they're swerving in and out of lanes, they're doing things that don't make any sense, you're going to want to be as far away from them as possible. That's exactly how it feels with dating nowadays. You're not going to want to play this game. You're going to want to be as far from them as possible. And the other thing, too, with this restaurant that was holding the venue, these places that I would say conventionally would have things like singles events, or maybe you could say men would go to meet women. Places like clubs or bars, what have you. Of course, not something I participate in or ever really have participated in. But the city I'm in, we're pretty known for our nightlife, I would say. Like many major cities, it's pretty big here. But I'll be out and about, and some nights I'm a bit of a night owl, but I will be out and about, and I will by chance drive by one of these bars or clubs or some place like that used to be full of people a number of years ago, and there will be no men there. There'll be a few women kind of in a group keeping to themselves, but there will be no men whatsoever. And I remember even a number of months ago, I had done a food delivery for the delivery was for a very prominent nightclub in there. I believe it was for the owner because I handed the food to the security. But it was for a very prominent nightclub in the area. And I remember I had gotten in the building and I got a brief kind of glimpse inside the club. And by the way, this wasn't during broad daylight. This was a Friday night that this was going on, that I made this delivery. And same thing, there were no men inside. There were just a bunch of women kind of keeping to themselves. Before they used to have ladies' nights at clubs where women would go in for free. That is not a thing anymore. Instead, they are trying to incentivize men to participate in this kind of stuff. But the men are now wise to it. They're now wise to it. And it ultimately comes down to, a big part of it is the social media stuff, the ridiculous standards where there's no baseline for anything anymore. The social media is a big part of it. But for anyone who is millennial, especially Gen Z, but even some millennials and people older, we had some form of social media even in the very early 2000s, right? But for the most part, it was for family. You would have people that would have family members on there, maybe some very close friends. But not all these acquaintances, not seeking validation, not seeking attention nonstop, like it's become now. There was some form of maturity, I guess, if that's the best way to put it, that is just non-existent. Now what I see is nothing but modern women looking for attention and validation and ultimately just wasting men's time. Now, could you imagine getting with someone like that? Because that's even the thing too. Let's say someone were to go to one of these singles events and get a phone number. Then there's the games, the phone tag and the games over text that I've seen. Just more validation and attention seeking, by the way. But with a woman like that, here's ultimately my stance on it. If someone is dependent on the attention and validation from everyone else for their own sense of confidence or self-esteem, how are they going to be capable of being loyal to one man? It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen, and men are wise to it now. I've seen situations where women will be even in relationships with guys, and they'll not want people to know because they will want to be monkey branching, thinking that the grass is always greener, looking for the next best thing because of things they've seen on social media, because they want to impress, by the way, people in their life that don't even play any role and don't even really care, quite frankly. That's something I think a lot of us learned at a young age, probably in our very early 20s, I would hope. But this whole thing with living for everyone else's approval and being so concerned with everyone else thinks, yeah, we usually grow out of it pretty soon. But I see women well into their 30s and 40s who have not grown out of that mindset. They just haven't. And what you have now is women using men as a stepping stone. This constant chasing of status, chasing of validation, chasing of attention, thinking that they can always do more and always can do better. And this is how far gone things have gone. On this ad that my friend had sent me from the restaurant, when we used to go there, there was a waitress who, I would say she was a conventionally attractive woman. And she was in the post. Now, I didn't recognize her at first because she got so much work done to herself. Her lips, her temples, her forehead, her cheeks. She got all this work done, all these things done. And keep in mind, this is a woman who was in her 20s. Absolutely ruined herself. She was unrecognizable. Me and my buddy were shocked that it was her. And what does that tell you right there? This constant chasing of perfection. We've all heard the saying, I'm sure some of us have at least. This idea of how someone does one thing is how they do everything. That shows you how they would feel when it comes to dating and relationships. Always thinking that they can do better, that there is something better. And what's so backwards about this is they end up making themselves look worse, far worse. This was a perfectly fine looking woman who was in her 20s. And when I was younger, many, many years ago, the only times I would see women getting these kind of things done is women in their 50s and 60s or older who would be trying to make themselves look like they're in their 20s. But now I see women in their 20s getting these kind of things done to make themselves look like something they've seen on social media, or I don't even know what it is anymore, but ultimately end up looking unattractive. That's what it is. In their minds, that is how far gone the narcissism has gotten, the entitlement has gotten, the unrealistic expectations. That is what it has led to. So I think that we've come to a point where men mutually know exactly what's going on. They see things and get what it is. They see things like singles events, they see things like dating apps, and they don't want to participate anymore. Now, you could argue it goes beyond that, but all this, I believe, is why a lot of even Gen Z now are craving nostalgia. I've seen a lot of people who didn't grow up in the 90s who are wanting to go back to the 90s or very early 2000s, to be fair. But I think a lot of it just comes down to is that we had peace through simplicity. I don't want to go on too much of a tangent here, though I think it applies to dating and kind of the broader picture here. But a time where there was not so much nonsense and everything wasn't just walking on eggshells, trying to play this game. Again, why would someone want to participate in a rigged game, right? But I remember I had a cousin of mine a while back who had a birthday party. He was turning 30. And they had a Pokemon-themed birthday party. And I thought at the time that it was immature. Now, I'm not someone who really does a whole lot for birthday parties, but it was, of course, nice seeing family and stuff like that. But at the time, I thought it was perhaps immature. But looking at it in the moment or shortly after, I looked back and I thought to myself, wait a second. That is a time when they didn't have to worry about all this dating app nonsense, the social media nonsense, the unrealistic expectations. They just had peace through simplicity. I'm not at all judging this person. But when it comes to real immaturity, just look at the behavior of modern women on social media and dating apps. That's what I see as real immaturity, because it is absolutely backwards of anything productive. And what it feels like, singles events, dating apps, dating as a whole, what it feels like is when I would make snacks kind of late in the day, shortly before bed, I'll make myself maybe some yogurt or scrambled egg, just something simple, right? It would feel like having to have a 5-star meal every night with steaks and caviar and all this kind of stuff, when it would really be for no purpose. You would be doing all these things, these performative things, walking over hoops and hurdles for absolutely no purpose. You could just have the thing right in front of you. The yogurt that's quick or the scrambled eggs. There's no need for all the nonsense. And men do not have time to waste on nonsense. They'd rather go to the gym. That is why you see men doing things to build themselves. They're not wasting time with things that are destructive anymore, that are distractions. They're wanting to build themselves. They're seeing through it. They're wanting to spend time with family. They're wanting to appreciate the things that they have and not want to chase some unrealistic vanity, some unrealistic standard. It's like running on a treadmill and think you're going to reach a destination, right? I mean, you could, for example, I could walk from where I'm at now to the other side of the room. Simple. But I could zigzag and turn backwards and do all these hoops and hurdles, and it could take 10 hours. Why would I want to have to put myself through all that unnecessary strain and stress and stuff like that, right? That's what dating feels like nowadays. That is what a singles event would feel like. You would go there and it would just be rejection and ridicule on repeat, because it is really just tearing down good men to make themselves feel better. And the men that they want, if they even exist, by the way, are not going to be at those kind of places to begin with. I think deep down they know that. I think a lot of it's just ego. Like when I go on when I have in the past, and when I hear people talk about things they've seen on dating apps, and they'll see a woman who's like 35, 40 years old with 2 or 3 different kids, single mother. and they will say things in the description like, don't have time to waste, this and that. I want a guy who has everything made, and car and own place and never had a divorce and all this kind of stuff. I'm thinking, like, you are having all these things, but you're not looking at yourself in the mirror. You are thinking that you can demand this and demand that, when it's not about building or supporting at all. It is about being there for the finish line. You shouldn't have someone with you who is just there to take what you've already accomplished. You know, if someone is constantly taking, we've all maybe dealt with this with friendships in the past, but if someone is constantly taking, and they're not providing anything, a rigged game, you're not going to want to participate, are you? Certainly not. So, as always, guys, I appreciate you for taking the time to view the video. And just when I see stuff like this, it's clear as day why singles events are empty and no men are attending. So, again, guys, I appreciate you viewing. Hope you guys have a good one. Thank you.